defamation lawyer, Maître Marc-André Coulombe, it was just a fancy way of telling me to shut up, not quite the belligerent, sort of foolish way. Well, actually, it was more foolish to accuse me of blasphemous libel than it was to tell me to shut up like that guy did. It was incredibly foolish. But what I'm getting at is, it's basically the same thing. This guy just says, shut up, shut up, shut up. Whereas the Unitarian Universalist Association says, shut up, shut up, shut up, by hiring a lawyer to falsely accuse me of a crime in an effort to intimidate me into not only shutting up, in other words, not just not saying anything more about such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers, but by erasing what I already have said. But getting back to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, I knew that this was bullshit. I knew that, the pretext for accusing me of blasphemous libel, specifically the pretext that my blog posts about Unitarian Universalist pedophiles and rapists were unfounded and vicious, was false. And after a little bit of research, I quickly discovered that even if I actually was making false accusations about Unitarian Universalist ministers, which wasn't the case, that this would not actually constitute blasphemous libel in any case. Blasphemous libel is basically blasphemy against the church. So what I did, knowing that I was innocent essentially, but knowing also that Maître Marc-André Coulombe had not identified exactly which blog post he was talking about, my initial response to Maître Marc-André Coulombe was not to say I'm innocent, but to say, where's your evidence? What blog posts are you talking about? Because I don't know which blog posts you're talking about. I've looked at my blog, and I can't find any blog posts that match your description of unfounded vicious allegations to the effect that ministers of the association engage in such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape. I essentially asked Maître Coulombe to elaborate on the accusations he made, and then not just that one, but some others. But that was the most serious, shall we say, accusation, also the most laughable one. I just asked him to tell me exactly which blog post he was talking about so I could go and have a look and read them and decide what to do. Because, he's saying your blog posts are unfounded and vicious, and they're defamatory, and they're so defamatory that they constitute the criminal act of blasphemous libel, so we could have you charged with blasphemous libel, and if you were found guilty, well, you could spend up to 2 years in jail. That's essentially what he was saying. Essentially saying shut up in those terms, threatening me with a jail sentence of up to 2 years for saying what I said. Essentially trying to hide the truth with intimidation, legal bullying. So anyway, I actually was expecting Maître Marc-André Coulombe to come back and say, well, this blog post here about Reverend Wallace Mitchell raping teenage Tibetan refugees, and this blog post here about First Parish Norwell Unitarian Richard Buell raping preteen girls, including female family member, and so on. In which case I would say, but these guys were charged and convicted, and they went to jail. There's nothing unfounded about that, is there? But what he did, he was an arrogant little prick, if you don't mind my saying so. He actually wrote back and he said, your claims not to be able to find the offending material are not credible, blah, 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 blah. You know very well where you've, posted, internet postings about, pedophilia and rape and child molestation committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers, blah, blah, blah. So I had to write back to him and say, well, no, Maître Coulombe, you don't understand. I know where I wrote about Reverend Wallace Mitchell. I know where I wrote about Richard Buell. I know where I wrote about Rev Dr Victoria Weinstein kicking one of her, you know, one of the children of one of her parishioners in the butt. I don't know, is that child molestation? Is that the child molestation you're talking about? You know, that physical abuse of a child by Rev Dr Victoria Weinstein? You know, is that what you mean by child molestation? You know, basically throwing his shit right back in his face, saying, you know, guess what, buddy? You know, you actually falsely accused me of blasphemous libel on the unfounded basis that I've made unfounded and vicious allegations the effective minister of the association engaged in such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape. So, of course, Maitre Marc-Andre Coulombe never wrote to me again. Never heard from him. You know, he heard from me, and he's still hearing from me. In fact, I think I'm going to write him a new letter soon, because he still hasn't formally withdrawn his false accusations. He still hasn't apologized for them. And of course, I didn't ask just that he must withdraw the accusations and he must apologize for them, but I said your client, the Unitarian Universalist Association, and the two ministers who were named in your, or actually they weren't named, but who were identified as it were, or alluded to in his demand letter, you know, they need to apologize too for their false accusations against me. So essentially, you know, when I was falsely accused of blasphemous libel for telling the truth about you know, such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape, or indeed other molestation of children, you know, I mean, we can, you know, it's open to some debate whether Rev Dr Victoria Weinstein's kicking of a young child in the tushy, to use her word, constitutes child molestation, but it's certainly a physical assault on a child, and therefore, you know, could fall within the definition of child molestation, although it's not a sexual molestation. It's still a molestation in the broadest dictionary sense of the word, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, I haven't actually consulted the dictionary definition of molestation recently, but I'm pretty sure that viciously kicking a child in the butt a couple of times might well fall within the definition of child molestation, in which case Reverend Dr. Victoria Weinstein is guilty of child molestation, or molestation of children. So anyhow, you know, we're having fun here, obviously, with the foolishness of telling me to shut up, like this idiot who told me to shut up some minutes ago, and who turned out to be, well, at least entering the Unitarian Church of Montreal. To be honest, his face was not familiar. It's not someone who I recognized. It's not like a long-time member of the Unitarian Church of Montreal. May not even be a member of the Unitarian Church of Montreal. May not even be a Unitarian Universalist at all, but clearly someone who had some kind of connection with the Unitarian Church of Montreal, because immediately after telling me to shut up, he entered the church. You know, it could have been a non-Unitarian member of the public telling me to shut up, because there are the occasional, you know, sort of willfully ignorant jerks who think that, you know, you shouldn't be protesting against the church at all. Doesn't matter what reasons you're protesting against the church. It's just a big faux pas to protest outside a church. So I've had the occasional person who's like not in any way involved with the Unitarian Church of Montreal, you know, tell me to shut up in one way or another. But no, this guy went into the church, so he obviously has some connection with the Unitarian Church of Montreal, and thus the larger Unitarian Universalist religious community, even if he's not an actual member. So anyway, we're pretty well done. We actually went longer with this protest than we had intended to. Have some very good interactions, including that asshole who told me to shut up. And one of the reasons I'm saying things like asshole, and I'm not normally someone who goes around spouting obscenities and this and that, but you know, when an asshole tells me to shut up, I sometimes am less than polite in my response, and so I'm deliberately being less than polite. That is somewhat offensive, because that is part of what free speech is about. You know, you're supposed to have a, you know, free speech isn't, you know, the right to be nice all the time. You know, that's not what free speech is about. Free speech isn't saying, oh, you can be polite all the time. You can be super nice all the time. No, the whole point of freedom of speech laws is that they're protecting your right to be controversial to some extent. They're protecting your right to say things that people don't want to hear. That's essentially what it comes down to. Freedom of speech laws are intended to uphold a person's constitutionally guaranteed civil right and freedom to say things that other people just don't want to hear. And there's no question that Montreal Unitarians and Unitarian Universalists more generally, and this asshole who told me to shut up, just don't want to hear what I'm saying on my picket signs. Which, to remind everyone, picket sign in the right hand says unsafe sect. There is no longer a question mark to soften the blow. In my left hand, the picket sign says Unitarian Universalist, perversion of justice, sucks you asterisk you, which could be read as sucks ass, I don't mind saying. The back side of that picket sign says Unitarian Universalist, slander and libel, suck you. So that's, I believe in a high level of freedom of speech, but I do believe there should be some reasonable limits. I don't believe people should be able to say things that are completely and utterly false and harmful and damaging with zero consequence. I do believe that the whole thing in terms of slander and libel is that in order for something to be slanderous, in order for something to be libelous, it has to be untrue. You can say something that may be very, very damaging about an individual or an institution or even a country or whatever, a group of people, as long as it's actually true, as long as you can support it with evidence that, well, no, this is the truth. I'm just stating the truth here. Then it's not slander. Then it's not libel. And that's why I haven't been charged with blasphemous libel, because what I'm saying about such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers, say nothing of certain Unitarian Universalist Sunday school teachers, is demonstrably